Pod. Welcome back to another episode of Say Who Say Pod. He's Danny O'Neil in a sports coat. I'm Christian Caple. Professional day is behind us, Danny. The day for pros. Pro
Woo! Day. Zack Durfee.
Yeah, if you needed it confirmed that Zack Durfee is an athletic freak. Like, this was a day for Zack Durfee, man. Getting to go out there and 6'4.5", 6'4 3/4", 247.5 pounds, I believe was the official measurement. 39-inch vertical. Said he ran the 40 in the mid 4.5s or so. The unofficial hand timing is always kind of tricky at pro day. You don't actually get a real time like you do at the combine, but guy can move.
Yeah, that was, even knowing he's a freaky athlete, like even knowing that's still in the upper quartile of freaky. Like, that is one of those Bruce Feldman super freak kind of displays of how big and fast that dude is. I don't know if he'll get drafted. I know that he is going to get a pretty good opportunity to make a team, though. There are 32 teams that would give him a shot to be on their training camp roster. There's absolutely, with those kind of measurables, absolutely will have his choice of opportunities if he doesn't end up getting drafted.
Yeah, not a lot of 6'5", 240 or 6'5", 250 edge rushers who have a nearly 40-inch vertical leap who don't get a camp invite. So I think you're dead on there. How about Amari Evans also?
So I'm happy for him. Like, anytime somebody performs pretty well, when I saw, and the initial announcement I saw or report was that he said that he was timed at 4.25. I was like, that's pretty blazing fast. That was a eyebrow of skepticism raised, but yeah, he's going to get an opportunity as well. He will have a training camp opportunity. I don't think he'll end up getting drafted though.
If obviously, like, there's a lot of different scouts and others standing at the finish line there, hand timing. Even if it wouldn't be like a laser 4.25 at the combine, it's probably not much slower than a 4.3 officially. And so you're talking about top end speed there. Yes. For a receiver who didn't get a ton of opportunities in his 1 year at Washington. I know he was dealt with an injury kind of off the bat that slowed him down. He didn't get to play much in their first couple games, and Raiden Weinsbright won the starting slot job. Also a 41-inch vertical leap for Amari Evans. So be interesting to see if maybe he gets a look as a special teams guy, or the question that always, from a Washington perspective, that always comes out of somebody who performs like that at the combine or at a pro day is, well, why didn't they use him more? Are you kidding me? You had a guy with that kind of speed, with those kind of hops, and you couldn't get him more than the touches he got. But it just didn't seem like he ever was going to be like a huge part of their plans once practices got going and they got to look at some of those freshmen. It seemed like they prioritized guys like Desmond Roebuck and Raiden Weinsbright based on the way that they performed in practice.
And you mentioned the injury. Those sort of things, and when they happen, can really impact whether a guy is able to build momentum. And when you're talking about a 1 year, sort of he's there for 1 year, it kind of has to hit right for you. Unless you're being brought in as you are the clear go-to guy, and that wasn't going to be the case with him because you had Denzel Boston here. I guess I have flashes of Jeremiah Hunter, where I thought Jeremiah Hunter was a really good receiver and certainly had some proven productivity, and it just never really clicked for him. And it's because when you get in that 1 year situation, things kind of have to hit right for you. And if a couple things don't go right, if another player emerges into a spot where maybe they thought you'd fit, or you get hurt and aren't able to do that, it can just knock things sideways. I guess that's a long way of saying that I don't always just blame, the coaches were blind about this. Receiver is the position where you're dependent on an awful lot happening for you to be able to get those opportunities. It requires the pass protection, and it requires the trust of the quarterback, and it requires you getting open. Like, that's a lot of things that have to go right, and it's not hard for it not to click for you when you've just got 1 year, 1 season of eligibility.
I joked with Zack Durfee. I was like, all these weight room stories over the years, and we don't get to see the bench press. He didn't do the bench press, and he was just like, yeah, I just didn't really feel like doing it. And I think the feedback a lot of these guys get from their agent and teams is that like they just don't really care that much about that. Maybe it's more important if you're playing on the interior or if you're playing O-line. From what I hear, it's like, if your guy is exemplary at it, then let him go do it. And if he can put up a huge number, then, especially if the huge number doesn't necessarily align with expectations for the position he plays, like if a running back or a receiver can go do 20 plus reps or whatever, like I think Jonah Coleman did 22 at the combine, then by all means go do it. But otherwise, like, you're not getting drafted off of your bench reps probably, especially if you're an edge rusher of that size who shows that kind of agility. With that said, Ontario Thompson did do 30 reps, which was pretty impressive. Not a secret that that's a big, strong guy, right? You take one look at him and you know that. I think he said he ran in the 4.7s in the 40. Also interesting talking to those two guys. Both of them at least explored getting a waiver to try to come back to Washington next year.
I saw that in your story on Montlake, and it kind of sounds like the NCAA is getting maybe a little more stringent, or at the very least, they were kind of told that it's probably not going to happen for you. And presumably, especially with someone like Durfee, that would have been right the same loophole or same qualification that Thaddeus Dixon had used, right?
No, so for Thompson, it would have. Durfee's would have been. I kind of tend to think Durfee would have had a better case because
it was over transferring.
Well, he's only played 3 college seasons, so for those who don't remember, like the whole deal with him coming to Washington ahead of the 2023 season and why he wasn't eligible to play that year was because the NCAA ruled him a 2-time transfer, even though his first transfer was from, I think it was North Dakota State, was the school he went to out of high school. And he just went as a student, not an athlete at all, not a walk-on, not part of any team, just went as a student. Had originally committed to play basketball at, I think, a Division III school in the Midwest, but it wasn't clear if they were going to have a season because of COVID, and he ended up not going. I think they did end up playing, but it was shortened. And wound up just going to, I think it was North Dakota State, if I remember off the top of my head, as a student, just regular old, taking classes, lifting weights probably still. And just didn't like it, didn't have a good time there. I think the social piece of it was maybe lacking. COVID was still weird, and came home and figured, like, I'll come home, I'll train, and I'll try to get an opportunity somewhere. I don't even think he was certain it was going to be in football. Probably was still thinking it was going to be basketball. And sent out his highlights. Sioux Falls wants him to come as a defensive end, which I don't think he'd ever played. They were thinking if it was going to be football, it was probably going to be tight end. He goes to Sioux Falls, I think originally as a walk-on, spends a year redshirting, then plays his redshirt freshman year in 2022, and of course blows up, has 11 sacks. I think had 4 sacks in his first game. Enters the portal and comes to Washington. But at the time, the NCAA, that was like the one teeny tiny little window of time where the NCAA was really cracking down on multiple time transfers. And they said, no, you were a student at a 4-year school and you left, and now you're doing it again. We don't care that you weren't part of any athletic program the first time you did it. You're a multiple time transfer. You're sitting out this year. That was why, when they rolled that rule back, he automatically got 2025. I think if he were to go back and go through an appeal process, he would have had a good shot to get another year, because his eligibility clock still holds that first year at North Dakota State against him when he wasn't even an athlete, which is the way that, like, the rules have been written for a long time. But it's also like, the default these days seems to be you can pretty much always get 4 full years of healthy competition if you haven't had it. And he hasn't had it. He was first part of a college football program in 2021 when he redshirted. Then he played in 2022. Then he had to sit out all of 2023, and he played 24 and 25. Like he's leaving having only participated in 3 college seasons. I kind of feel like he still could have got another one, but talking to him before the season, it sort of felt like mentally he was like, "Look, I've been out of high school for many years now. Like I'm a starter, I'm a leader on this team. I'm going to play this season, and then it's going to be time to go pro."
It makes sense. No, it doesn't make sense from the NCAA point of view. It makes sense from his perspective of what is next in life. And I have wondered that for some of these guys when you're 25 or 26 and still playing college football. Like it's increasingly professionalized. It's somewhat lucrative or potentially lucrative now, but it's also got to be weird. I mean, the guy who's at Montana, who's going to be playing for like basically the 9th year that he's been in college, even though it's only going to be his 4th season of competition. Like that's strange. I think we can all agree that that's weird.
Our friends at Chuck Olson Kia and Shoreline have been at the pro level for a long time now.
No eligibility concerns there. No, they don't have any appeals. Like their experience speaks to the quality of service that they provided over more than half a century now.
Their friendly, low-pressure sales staff has been operating at the most professional level since 1964. Locally owned and operated, family owned and operated by family University of Washington graduates. We hope that you'll go experience your next vehicle buying process at Chuck Olson Kia in Shoreline. And if you do, we hope you'll ask for our friend Henry Olson and tell him that Say Who Say Pod sent you. This episode of Say Who Say Pod also brought to you by our friends at Husky Mobile. Husky Mobile's partnered directly with the University of Washington to offer affordable phone plans for the Husky community with up to 7% of each bill going back to UW Athletics. Subscribers can also enjoy game day perks like fast pass lanes, seat upgrades, and giveaways, all while on T-Mobile's nationwide 5G network. Go to gohuskymobile.com to make the switch today and use code ONMontlake. That's code ONMontlake at checkout to get your first month free when transferring your number. Thanks again to Husky Mobile for supporting today's show. Ontario Thompson's eligibility case would have been more along like the JUCO. Like, hey, I played 1 year of JUCO ball, redshirted a year at JUCO. Has basically he's played 3 years of 4-year college football at Iowa, at Western Michigan, and at Washington. So his would have been trying to get the same treatment that Diego Pavia got, which ultimately got the same treatment for every guy who was going to finish his eligibility last year who'd played JUCO ball. That waiver did not extend to this year, so it would have been a fight. And I think what he said was that looking at how similar cases were playing out around the country, it just didn't seem like that was going to come through. But he seemed more of the mind that, like, if it were up to me, he really felt like he could have used another year at college to develop. Whereas I don't know that Durfee was quite as sold on it. Durfee seemed more like, let me apply and like keep open as many options as I can so that I have as diverse of an array of choices here to evaluate as the next step. But I don't know that he was super in for like a protracted fight over it, especially with what he's been through. Like, who wants to go through all that again?
He was an incredibly talented player to watch, and I certainly am rooting for him. I think it's always interesting to see when a guy with those kind of physical skills and the question of health kind of hangs over it. But man, like you will see guys that blossom in the NFL for a variety of reasons when it didn't happen in college, or maybe didn't happen as much as people thought in college. Every time NFL team will say, give me that size and give me that speed, and we'll figure out what to do with him.
We've got some synergy today with Ian because he asked about the exact thing that I wanted to talk about on this episode.
Here's our conversation with IP McFarland.
All right, guys, we're filming on location with terrible sound quality this week because I forgot to record. I am in the storage room of I'm not going to say what school district, our school district's education foundation, where I'm volunteering this evening. You can see me sweating because it's 102 degrees here in greater Los Angeles. and I've been working and sitting in it. The question this week is about FanDuel's win total for the University of Washington, which was brought out at 7.5, which is a decided improvement from last year, still well below where most of us want the program to be. If Washington wins 7 or 8, what is the vibe in the community? What's the vibe around Jed Fish? And is he even sticking around if that's where he is after year 4? Guys, have a good week. Go Sonics. Go Dogs. Sorry for the terrible sound. I love y'all. Talk to you next week. Go Dogs.
Now, what's funny is that the sound is better than normal. At least it
I
was
was going
to
to
my
say,
ears.
I don't know why he thought it was so bad.
You should be in a storage closet each and every time.
So I'm glad he asked about the win totals. That's what I wanted to talk about. 7.5 for Washington leaps off the page, does it not?
Yes. People are going to be furious if they win 8 games. If you place a bet and win that bet with 8 wins, you're still going to have a lot of very unhappy Husky fans.
Yes. I don't know, and I'd have to go through the list a little more with a little more specificity. I don't know that there's another total on here for a team that could more disappoint its fan base, even if the over hit. Husky fans would not be pleased at all with an 8-4 season. I think that a 9-3 season could end up disappointing depending on the nature of the 9-3. I'm not saying that that's like a certainty. If this team loses 4 games this year, people are not going to be happy. So in terms of like a pure money play, I mean, if you're the gambling type, are you not hammering this on the over?
Yeah, and the interesting thing that I think from that perspective is that it reflects sort of how Washington is seen nationally, which probably ties into the conference move and maybe some of the fears that I had about Washington getting lost in a conference where they're not a geographic fit. Because, I mean, the projections like this or gambling lines like this, they don't reflect what the odds makers think will happen. They reflect what the odds makers think will get even money on both sides. Like that's when a season win total projection, that is what the line makers think. There are going to be as many people that think this team wins 7 games or fewer as think it wins 8 games or more. And so like that's the first thing is like, wow, people really do not expect much from Washington.
So looking at the win totals for their opponents, Indiana's is 10.5. I'm just going from like the top down here. Indiana and Oregon both at 10.5. USC is Penn State is at 9.5. A reflection as much of their schedule as anything. Yep. And USC is at 8.5. Those are the only 4 opponents whose win total is greater than Washington's. Iowa's is the same at 7.5. Nebraska's is at 6.5.
That surprised me. Because that was the first thing that I went to was like, okay, does Nebraska have a higher? And they didn't. And then I was like, wow, like that surprised me. Nebraska's number surprised me more than Washington's number surprised me.
So they could go 0-4 against the Indiana, Oregon, Penn State, USC, call it quadrant, and still hit the over here and have not a great season.
Yeah.
Iowa at home will still be tough. Nebraska on the road will still be tough. If you're taking the under, you are counting on very little progress from the offense and probably some regression by the defense.
So there's so many different ways to approach this because there's the question of how Husky fans will feel about different outcomes. There are going to be Husky fans who are going to be upset if Washington doesn't win 10 games. Like I think that's the expectation for this season. This season is a success if Washington makes the college football playoff. Like there are some people that will set the bar there. And I think most people would say, okay, there are scenarios where not getting to the college football playoff, you'll still look back and say this season was a step forward. If you go 9-3, but the win is against Oregon, or like there's different like sort of permutations of how the season goes that you would. But I would say in general, most Washington fans would say anything less than 10 wins is going to be considered a disappointment. And even if it's 8 wins, you have some real reservations about the direction of this program, because this is the quarterback that your coach picked, stood by, and has developed to this point where he thinks he's one of the best quarterbacks in college football. He tried to leave, and we're trying to get over all of that. Like, we're trying to push past that. But if it doesn't pop now, given sort of you bending over backwards to accommodate the quarterback, when exactly is it going to, like, there will be, 8 wins will be considered as a disaster by a significant chunk of the fan base.
And, injuries happen, right? Like if the wrong guys get hurt, that changes the picture. And like, if you do come up short of that win total, maybe that changes what the outlook would be from the fan base, right? Of like, okay, well, under no circumstances is anyone happy with 8-4, but like, if the starting quarterback gets hurt and misses a couple games, like that changes the calculus a little bit. At least you would sit here on a Wednesday in March and say that it does. It has a funny way of working out where when the quarterback actually gets hurt and misses games, people aren't as forgiving in the moment. But
they certainly are not. But those are the sort of, that's where you get into, if the quarterback gets hurt in a season, all bets are off. I generally think that's for decision makers. It doesn't mean that's how fans will feel, but for decision makers, they're like, okay, what are you going to do? Like that happens and it changes it. But I'm not sure if an injury outside the quarterback, would necessarily change how the people that matter view the season. That's the one. It's the first season was, in my mind, Jed's first season was pretty much not a wash, but I'm not going to scrutinize anything because of the state of the offensive line. And I don't, outside of an injury to the quarterback, it feels like whatever happens in this season is going to be seen, and in my opinion, fairly, as a reflection on Jed's program building.
What are the areas of greatest concern? Like if I told you that they go under 7.5, or even that they hit the over, but it's just 8, like what's your assumption for what happened and why that caused them to make no progress from last season's win total?
Their defensive front four is below Big Ten acceptable standards, like below replacement level in the Big Ten. If they win 8 games, I will think that their defensive line was among the very worst in the conference.
And I don't know that there's reason to think that it will be. So this is why I can't, like, 7.5 is very much playing off the perception that Washington just doesn't have it, that they're stuck in mediocrity. They're going to be a preseason top 25 team.
They should be.
I mean, they're in every way too early ranking.
Okay.
I can't imagine what would change between then and now.
I'm glad to hear that.
I'm telling you, they're going to be this year's Illinois. And you know what? I was down on Illinois all of last year as like a playoff contender. I still took them to go over their number of 7.5. Because I looked at their schedule and I'm like, this is not a 10-win team based on what they did in 2024, but they should definitely win 8. And they probably should have won 9 because one of their 4 losses was to Wisconsin. So even if, like, on the bottom end, if Washington doesn't take the step forward, get over the hump against the elite defenses, if the offense doesn't progress, if Damon Williams Jr. doesn't continue to develop and get better at some of the things that held him back a little bit last year, and if the defensive front does take a step back, because, like, they didn't have elite talent all along the D-line last year, but they played really well.
Yes, they did. Defense got better, significantly better over the course of the year.
We talked about, right, like the whole was better than the sum of the parts. And so if just none of those things line up right, and they're not the CFP contender that I think folks should expect them to be, because I think it's year 3. You know what the school has invested. You move to the Big Ten. Like, I just think that's what people should expect in a 12-team era at a school like Washington. They could still hit the over. You know, they could still be a team that wins 8 games. So this is one of, as you know, looking at it objectively, like just with a gambler's mindset, I guess, this is to me objectively one of the more appealing numbers on the board here in the Big Ten.
I would agree with that. I would also add to this: at no point, if Washington finishes 8-4, do I want to hear any mention of, well, the line was only 7.5, so maybe our expectations were too high.
You're going to hear it.
At no point do I want
to hear it from me.
No, at no point do I want that trotted out here. I want it to be universally recognized that number is kind of absurdly low, in my opinion, and I very much don't come here with 8 wins trying to tell me that this was an okay season given everything that was there. Like, no, it's got to be better than that.
There is the whole, like, it's the Big Ten, it's an 18-team league. You never know when a Michigan State or a Minnesota is going to be like way better than everyone thought. And now maybe you drop one of those and now you're behind pace and you got to make up one somewhere.
But Washington should be in that category too, right?
No doubt. No doubt.
Okay, all that's true, but there's every reason to think that Washington should be more likely than either of those 2 schools to be the one that pops this year. And not only that, but I mean, 2 years in, and this is a 3rd season, I don't think a home victory over Michigan, a down Michigan team, should be like the only hang your hat type victory that you have. Like, that's at that point, we're talking about really 3 years of underwhelming or basically meeting the bare minimum of expectations.
That's right. That's true. I ranked Washington's first 26 games under Jed Fish a couple weeks ago from least impressive to most impressive. And I had that Michigan game number 1. I had to win at Maryland number 2.
That's so funny.
And I'm like, this was a 1-8 Big Ten team. This was a Big Ten team that did not win another game the rest of this game was played on October 4th, and at that time Maryland already had won its final game of the 2025 season. But and if not for the final like quarter and a half of that game, you'd be calling it like one of their worst conference losses in memory. Probably worse than Wisconsin, even.
No, that Wisconsin one was god awful.
But you fall behind 20-0 in the 3rd quarter in the Eastern time zone in the Big Ten, and you win the game. Now it's impressive.
It's so funny
in a way that it wouldn't have been if they'd like started well and won by 15. Yeah. You know,
I agree. I agree with all that, and there's also this part of me that's like, well, maybe Washington was so good that they just knocked the wind out of Maryland for the rest of the year.
Oh yeah, that was that was all any of the analysts were talking about.
They were a sledgehammer to the kneecap of Maryland, and the Terps just never recovered after Washington just took the wind out of their sails.
Every subsequent Maryland game, that was all the broadcasters. Well, we're seeing the Washington effect here.
They're still reeling from that loss to Washington.
Of course, you go back through Maryland's schedule, and you got to circle that Washington game. That changed everything. Maybe it did. Shoot, they were 4-0. You know,
I mean, I do believe that victory it matters what Maryland's record was, and it matters how Maryland felt about itself at halftime. And Washington did have to pick itself up. I don't want to completely say, yeah, that was, but when you look at it at the end, you're like, yeah, that Maryland team wasn't that good. And if that freshman didn't get hurt, I don't know if they're able to even come back, the freshman pass rusher. What was of the 26 games, what was the worst? Is it the Penn State game?
You know what the worst one is.
The Rutgers game?
More recent.
The Wisconsin game?
Wisconsin. I went Wisconsin, Rutgers, Wazoo were the bottom three.
Oh, really? The Penn State one didn't. Was that just because you think like there's no shame in getting dragged around by that Penn State team because that Penn State team, I mean, was good, won a playoff game, that sort of thing?
Yeah, the thinking is like the ceiling for Washington in that game was a loss.
Yeah,
like
you're right.
It was just a more competitive loss. Like did not enter the brain of anybody who cared about that game that Washington ever might win. And similar story with Oregon. I had Oregon like one notch higher just because like it was Damon Williams' first start. I think he actually played decently well in that game for being a true freshman, making his first start against the number one team in the country on the road and all those things. And like they were not as thoroughly outclassed from kickoff like they were at Penn State.
Well, Penn State, they did drive down for a attempted field goal on that first possession. Like it looked like they might.
That's true. That's true. They Damon also, I guess, played decently well in the second half of that game. Ripped off that big long scramble, and I went Rutgers as second least impressive just because like this is clearly you were better than this team. You outgained them by 220 some yards and had every opportunity in the world to win this game and win it by multiple scores and so many self-inflicted errors. And so like I think a Husky fan came away from Rutgers feeling much worse than they did Penn State. I'm always like I was trying to calibrate it to expectations. And same thing with the Apple Cup too, although I think that was not a bad Wazoo team they lost to, but still not a game they should have lost.
No, not a game they should have lost, although everything leading up to that, like the emotional sort of tides at that point between the two programs and Washington State feeling we were the one that was left behind and everybody that's still here is pulling. It's an interesting question because the Wisconsin game and the Rutgers game are certainly the two games where it's like, I can't believe you lost to that team that way. I can't believe like that was just, you really had to go out of your way to lose like that. Like that took effort on your part. The Penn State game is funny because I think I would say that the Penn State game I would put number one just because it was, man, you don't even belong on the same field with them. Like we kind of knew that going in and it just looked so dramatically like that. And that Washington, in my mind, Washington should never like it's a strong enough program that it really shouldn't ever be like that. It shouldn't. And there are some extenuating circumstances and certainly how Washington, the amount of talent that Washington lost because of the coaching change. But it was that was tough to watch. It was tough to see them so outclassed.
Yeah, I get that. And maybe it's not right to give them credit for the situation being so lopsided going into the game. Like maybe that's
I get it. I get what you're saying, but the list, like that was a game that was never going to turn into a victory. That it wasn't the way it was played. And Wisconsin and Rutgers and Washington State, all three of those games were like, Washington. There's no reason for Washington to lose those three games other than that they just flubbed it.
The watching the team come off the field after Wisconsin, like I've not covered many games where the vibe and the way the players were reacting and the things they were saying so clearly pointed to like a team that just could not believe they lost to that team. Like maybe Montana.
Yeah.
Certainly Montana in 2021. But like I think they knew, right? Like this was not just a hard fought conference game and we lost. Like this was a team we should have beat. I can't believe we didn't win this game. Like that was very much the vibe I got.
It's so funny because in my like how I view it is it's kind of like you guys kept messing around. Like you guys were flirting with that sort of disaster and you barely missed it against Maryland and you didn't learn your lesson. There was sort of you guys were cruising for a bruising and feeling that not that they deserved it, but that one that one they earned that one. They'd been coming really close to laying eggs before, and then that one they just couldn't quite rescue it at the end.
You play with fire often enough, right?
That's exactly how I felt, where I was like, yeah, you shouldn't have lost that game, but you've also been messing around like that repeatedly, and eventually you were going to get burned, and you did.
When we were talking to Durfee after Pro Day, he was answering a question about, kind of did he feel snubbed at all not getting a combine invite, and that none of their D linemen did. And he kind of said, like, yeah, I mean, you look at how I think we had a really good defense, and like you look at how close we were to winning a couple more games, and like, if we'd been a playoff team, like I bet there'd be more attention on some of our players. And he's like, I mean, some of those games, it's like even games that got away from us were like, very competitive. And he's like, I mean, it's like, I don't even want to bring it up, but Wisconsin, just to name one. And so you could tell like that one was different. Like, I think losing to Ohio State, losing to Michigan, losing to Oregon, those sting for other reasons. And he brought up Michigan too, which was just a strange game that was tied with less than 2 minutes left in the third quarter, and they had possession of the ball, but I don't know that it ever like felt like they were going to win that game. And then obviously the turnovers happened and it got away from them. But I think that Wisconsin game really stings.
Yeah. Do you think it sits with it? Does it, from your perspective and looking at it, does that stick out as something that soured last season?
I think it did for some people.
Uh-huh.
It's the difference between 9-3 and 8-4. And I feel like 9-3 is just like a little bit shinier.
For sure it is.
One game better. And you'd have a chance. Now, they wouldn't have probably played in the same bowl game, so you can't draw a straight line to
right.
It would have been a 10-win season. But you would have had a chance for 10 wins in, say they'd gone to the Holiday Bowl instead or whatever. You'd be playing for, and, you think Jed Fish would have talked about that all December, right? Playing for a Holiday Bowl championship and a chance to be a 10-win team. Like, even in this era where there's more games, like that still means something. And being able to hang your hat on, look, 10 wins in year 2. It took us year 3 at Arizona to get to 10. We got 10 wins in year 2 in the Big Ten. Can you believe that? That's what it cost them. It might have cost, on the flip side, like that was right about the time that UCLA and Florida speculation was at its highest. Maybe that tamped it down a little bit. The following week was the week when Jed Fish came out and was a little bit more passionate, refuting some of the rumors.
He was mad because he was on the list. I feel like 8-4 is an accurate reflection of how that team played. And I
would agree.
Like 9-3, like say they win the Wisconsin game, they pull it out. And they go 9-3 and then win their bowl game, which would have been a better bowl. And like you said, you shouldn't take that for granted, but they get to 10 wins. I don't think I'd feel dramatically different about, like, I know that the sense then would have been, man, they were close to the college football playoff. And my reaction is, no, they really weren't. They really were not. That 8-4 is an accurate reflection of how that team played. More accurate than 9-3 would have been, which I guess is a silly distinction to make. There's sometimes I feel the 95 Huskies team, like that was a team that was better than its record indicated. And that was the first year that they're off of probation. They went to the Sun Bowl. They lost to Iowa there, but they were up 21-0 on USC and ended up tying that game. They lost to Oregon because the kicker missed a couple field goals. Like that was a team, they blew a game against Notre Dame because failing to cover a receiver on a 2-point conversion, Derek Mays, who was their best receiver. Like all these, like I look back and like that team was better than that record. And it's not to say they should, but just like, man, like they had a couple of pretty tough luck losses there. And I felt like with this last season, I was like, yeah, no, that's an 8-4 football team. I've seen 8-4 football teams. That was an 8-4 football team.
And also, like, say they beat Wisconsin and they pull off the upset over Oregon, they get to 10-2, which was like, that was the path, right? You got to go 10-2. You got to beat Oregon. You got to hope that were they going to get in over Miami?
That's an yeah.
Were they going to get in over Oregon?
Well, that's the thing. They have to get in over Oregon, right?
You'd think so, but like
you have to.
They did end up honoring the head-to-head with Miami and Notre Dame.
That's true. So I would go crazy like all of this that I was saying. If I would be okay with neither getting in, I would go crazy if Oregon got in. And I would bring up that 1995 season when Oregon went to the Cotton Bowl instead of Washington, basically because of head-to-head. Like that is, I would have gone crazy. That's funny to think about. I would have gone so nuts.
Do you think this wouldn't have happened, but you could have bumped both out and then taken Notre Dame. That could have been the solution. Like, let's just leave the Big Ten gets 2 teams.
You know what? That probably would have happened. I'm still slightly surprised that they left Notre Dame out and picked Miami. Like I'm still like there's just the financial aspect of it. I'm slightly surprised that they had the integrity to do what they did in the selection committee, because I do think head to head. I don't care when the game was. I don't care the circumstances the game was decided. I suppose if there was a 5th down thing where there was an obvious officiating error, I might listen to an argument about why head-to-head shouldn't decide it. But if 2 teams have the same record and one team beat the other head-to-head, there is no world in which the team that lost the head-to-head meeting should get something ahead of the team that beat them.
Oregon wound up the 5 seed. So you're talking about would a loss to, in this hypothetical fantasy universe, would a loss to a 10-2 conference opponent have dropped them 6 spots? Would they have been 6 spots lower as a result of losing that game? Certainly they'd be behind Ole Miss, who is 11-1 at number 6. Certainly they'd have been behind Texas A&M, who is 11-1 at number 7. Oklahoma was 10-2 and the 8 seed, and Alabama was 10-3 and the 9 seed after losing the SEC championship game in convincing fashion to Georgia. So you'd be down in that like Alabama, Miami, Notre Dame territory, and how would they have sorted that out?
You can't, like, you just can't. I don't care what the numbers are, right? And hasn't the selection committee played this out? Like, they will leave an undefeated team out of the playoff in order to avoid choosing the team that lost a head-to-head over a team with the same record. Like they will leave an undefeated team out to avoid doing that, right? That's what we learned from the Texas, Alabama, Florida State is they will abjectly like, sorry, you're going to howl and you're going to hate this. And I understand why you hate this. We're still going to do it because we're going to put Alabama in here and we can't put Alabama in here unless we put Texas in here. So that's the way it's going to go. They'd either had to take Washington and Oregon or just take Washington. You can't take Oregon in that situation.
You're probably right. The bottom line is every time Washington had a chance to stay in the hunt and prove that it was a contender,
they didn't do it.
They played in a way that showed exactly why they had no business being in the playoff last year. So that's like, to me, that's more than, can they go over 7.5?
Yeah.
Like that's what you're looking for this year. Did they play like a contender against other contenders?
I 100% agree with you. I think that's the perfect way to say it. More than their overall record is, do they have games where you come out of that Ohio State game and you feel like, okay, they were respectable. It didn't look like Penn State last year. It didn't look like Oregon last year. I don't think they came particularly close to winning that game. I don't think Ohio State was ever put in a situation. They played it safe and eventually pulled away. And against Michigan, I do think that Washington had a chance to win that game. And when they had that chance to win that game, they puked on themselves. They showed that they played well enough defensively to win that game, and their offense that was the strength of this team, and your star quarterback wasn't able to do it in the end. And maybe that's growing pains, but every time they had an opportunity to take that step forward, they kind of showed why they weren't. And this next year, the progress should be that they should they should be able to win a game or two that people don't expect them to against good teams and be competitive in the other ones.
Well, also that you should have better depth on the O-line to ensure that, like, okay, when Carver Willis and John Mills are both out at Michigan, you're more competitive in the trenches than they were. When those guys, Willis and Mills played at Wisconsin, but as a party went down, the right tackle goes down, Landon Hatchett goes down, their center can't play. You know, they're down to, like, they're throwing Pocky Finau in there to get reps at right tackle. I'm not sure if he was practicing there at all. And it wasn't until the next week when they got a chance to regroup, they moved John Mills out there, and he was, of course, awesome. And, you know, so when you come into a situation where you're down to your third tackle this year, it's Colt Dietrich. It's somebody who's got FBS starting experience, who's played in college, who you feel a little bit better about, and you know, you're plugging holes with guys who are, you know, whose floor is a bit higher than what you were dealing with if you had an injury or two last year. And, you know, I think even that's maybe a little bit TBD. Like when you get down into that, like who's your 7th and 8th and 9th O lineman, you know, I think you need to bring some of those guys along this spring. That'll be what this spring is for as well. You need a backup center too, at least to like establish who your backup center is. I saw like Landon Hatchett and a bunch of players were at Pro Day. He's still got a little like soft cast brace on his right hand. He had surgery on his wrist after the season. I'm not totally sure like if that'll hold him back in spring, or like if you're, you know, maybe you'll have somebody else with the ones and he gets a chance to rest up and come back healthy in the summer. But be curious to just kind of see how they bring along that O-line depth, because that, like, they felt pretty good about their starting offensive line last year, you know, whereas I feel like 2024 kind of framed the mentality of like, how adequate is the starting five you can put on the field, because their starting five was very lacking.
Yep.
Well, I think they put out a pretty solid starting five last year. You know, not perfect. Nobody is. But when one injuries hit, especially when two injuries hit, that's when it really like, okay, the top 7 or 8 here is still a little bit shaky. So did you see what Zack Durfee said about John Mills?
I did. I was going to just bring that up because it was clear how much, like how highly Durfee thought of Mills. And then I was going to ask the question, of all the players on the team right now, does Mills have the highest like future draft stock? Like who would you label as, if not if they were going to be drafted right now, but when they come out, who would be picked highest? Is Mills top of that?
He is in the conversation for sure. I feel like if Cody Green is what they think he is, and then you're talking about an NFL tackle, maybe he's a little more coveted.
That part's certainly true. Like it is very rare to have an interior lineman chosen in the first half of the first round, where tackles regularly go. Like your best 2 or 3 tackles in a lot of years will go in the first half of the first round.
I think Derek Coleman-Brusa could be in the conversation. You know, positionally, like by the time he's coming out of Washington, and again, if all goes according to plan, I think like this coaching staff probably very much hopes that he will have a 3-year career at UW. You know, is he being drafted as an interior, as a defensive tackle by that point? Is he somebody who could line up as a D end? Like what size will he be, right? Like what size will have proven to be his best frame in college for what Washington wants him to do, and also like what he projects as a pro. So you look at measurables as much as anything, right? When talking about like who could potentially be a first round pick. I think if Dylan Robinson performs really well as a corner the next 2 years, I mean, 6'3" and whatever he is now, probably over 210. Probably, I would imagine they want him around 215 or 220. And he's, you know, you look at his high school track times, like
dude,
that dude's
fast.
a freak athlete for that size and that position and running the way he does. If he proves to be, you know, a really sticky cornerback, a star in man coverage. And, I think he already has shown some pretty like natural instincts, ball skill wise, like punching the ball out and causing fumbles. He had a sack in the Oregon game, blitzing from his corner position. It's assumed he's stepping into the starting lineup this year. Like, that's a guy who could have 2 full years of tape as a starting cornerback in the Big Ten, being 6'3" and that athletic. So, obviously, like, John Mills, I think, is number one by a wide margin right now as far as guys who have put it on tape in college. Like, based on their college performance, this person will obviously be a coveted NFL prospect when the time comes. But there are a number of guys in this 26 class who I think have that potential as well. And like, just again, the frame, the athleticism, the size at his position, hard to say like what more Dylan Robinson could have, right?
He's pretty talented. I put Rainey Saleh on that.
Yeah, I was just thinking him too.
Is on that list. It's positional value matters a ton in the NFL draft, and middle linebackers are. It can be hard for those guys to get into that upper half of the first round or even into the first round. But I was really impressed with. I mean, he looks so mobile, and he looks like a guy that is certainly can get bigger. But I was really impressed with how he played last year.
Ryland Dillard-Allen, another guy in that class who played a bunch last year, who I think is pretty obviously going to be a starter this year. I think you love the speed. He is a little bit on the smaller side for an NFL safety. So I wonder if, when the time comes, like, does that knock him back a little bit? You got to remember, even Budda Baker was not a first-round pick.
I know.
Which is crazy, right?
It's nuts.
He played like one throughout his career, but to be a first-round safety, like, you gotta check a lot of boxes.
It's a funny thing. First round safeties and tight ends. Like, it's really hard for. It's unusual to see either tight ends or safeties drafted in the first half of the first round, and certainly in the top 10. But then even when it happens, that doesn't always tend to be like the home run pick that you would think. You'd think if a tight end is good enough to be drafted in the top 10, he is going to be an absolute stud. Can't miss type player. That's generally not been the case, but yeah, it is hard for safeties to climb up that high.
You wonder about like a receiver like Jordan Clay. If he is a guy who plays right away as a freshman, that's another big like 6'3", 6'4" target, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's got that size and has a chance in this offense to be, featured the way that Denzel Boston was. Like, they're always going to be a lot of targets to go around for that big X type receiver. With any of these 2026 guys, like, you're putting the cart way before the horse. They literally have not practiced in college yet.
Yeah.
But in this era of recruiting and verified measurements and times and everything, like, you do have a pretty good sense of the kind of athlete a guy is, even coming into college. And so the NFL draft is about projection in some ways. And I do think that there is some projectable NFL talent combined with measurables on the roster right now.
Were you surprised that Denzel Boston didn't run the 40?
A little bit.
And he basically said his agent had advised him not to.
Yeah, when he didn't at the combine, I assumed he would at pro day.
Mm-hmm.
And I especially assumed the same of Jonah Coleman. I think what did Denzel's? I didn't get a chance to talk to him because I was talking to somebody else, and then he was pulled away for other duties. But he said he was basically like, because of the injury, he was behind on his training, and that's the thing. Like, these guys go right into, a little bit of a break once the season ends, but like, these guys train specifically for these events.
Oh, for sure they do. Yes,
for weeks and weeks, and so if you only got 4 weeks attacking it full go, and you're going to be compared against guys who have been doing it for 8 or 9 weeks, like, I could see not wanting to. And, I think the one thing that you most wonder about Denzel Boston is probably his straight line speed.
Yes.
But I don't know that it's a question mark that's going to like prevent teams from picking him.
Yeah, it's an interesting calculus that players have to make. And I think the whole idea that people will promote of like, hey, if you're a competitor, you'll go out there and just compete and do all of the other things. Like, I think that's a bunch of BS. I think that is hokum that is propagated by NFL teams because NFL teams want as much information as they can get. So they claim that like that will make more of a impression on them. Then no, it won't. Like a guy should do things that he thinks will help get him drafted highest. And if he thinks something might impact his draft stock negatively, he should not do that. This is a very American way to approach things. I took it that Denzel, with his training, didn't feel that he was going to run a time that would increase his stock. And I think that probably lessens the likelihood that he goes in the first round, but it doesn't signal to me that he's going to drop out of it. I think he'll be a second round pick, maybe early third round, but I certainly didn't. It's interesting because I saw people saying like, "Oh, that was a red flag." It's like, no, it's not. It's not a red flag. Like it might not be what you want to see because it impacts your ability to like slide him in there, but those are the right decisions for players to make if they don't think that specifically is going to help them.
I think it seemed like Jonah Coleman's approach was similar. Like he was coming off the knee injury. He didn't do anything at the combine and said, "Oh, I'll work out at my pro day." If you don't feel ready to run the 40 at the combine, which I assume was mostly a health thing, like there hasn't been that much time, in between. This is a fairly early pro day, I feel like. So it seemed like his approach was like, I'm going to do the drills. I'm going to run routes. I'm going to show everybody that what I look like playing football, right? These are football movements. You can see I'm healthy. You can see I don't look slow. I don't need to have a time out there, but he is a running back.
Yes.
And again, like I feel like the straight line speed thing is a question of, we know he's strong. We know he's tough. We know he's got good vision. We know he's durable. He's got a ton of college tape. How fast is he in the open field? So, maybe that hurts him a little bit. I don't know. My default on all of this is it's all completely overrated.
The combine testing?
Yeah, any test. Like it could if you're not a big name, if you're likely an undrafted free agent at best and you put up crazy numbers, that could be cause for like teams to take another look at your tape. Yes. and maybe get you a camp invite that you wouldn't have got otherwise. But I think if you are firmly in that like draftable territory, especially when you've played as much as Jonah Coleman and Denzel Boston have, like I don't know how much any of those individual measurements matters.
I've always thought of like a surprising Ephesians Prysock and Takario Davis. They're 40 times. Those are like pole vault sticks that can leverage you up significantly in the draft order. Like when you put up a really fast time like that. But the fact that you don't try and do that doesn't have a negative correlation like people seem to think. Like I agree with you in that people overrate what a quote unquote like slow time will do. Like people were talking about Carnell Tate, that his 40 time was slower than expected. I think there was some dispute over whether he ran 4.5 or 4.45. Like he's not going to drop into the second round like that. His slow 40 time is not going to cause him to drop into the second round. Like, does it potentially keep a team from drafting him number 8? Maybe, but I think that part is dramatically overplayed. But you can put yourself on a team's radar by doing something that they don't expect in physical testing.
I can't. I've never been able to get my head around the fact that like you spend the offseason training to run the 40.
Yeah.
And that if you just took a guy, gave him a couple weeks to like rest up and get healthy and had him run the 40, he would run a different time than he's going to run at the combine when he's been training specifically for this event that has nothing to do with playing football. Speed has plenty to do with playing football. The 40-yard dash itself, like you're never going to line up and get ready, set, and run 40 yards straight and then stop. You'll run 40 yards at a time, but with pads on, carrying a ball with guys chasing you. I don't know. I've never been able to get my head around the idea of like, okay, we're going to have you guys train specifically for success in these, what are effectively track and field events. And we're going to judge your speed based on that when it's not football. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. There was a while, I think it probably people can tell, I don't have an incredibly high degree of reverence for the way NFL teams tend to view sort of their prospective employees. Like I think that it's reflected in the scouting combine that they are treated like widgets. And that there was a time when I was even a little more cynical. I was like, I think the primary goal of the scouting combine is for them to test who will get in line most readily, like who will show like maximum, like pretend that this is as important as NFL teams want them to pretend. Like how well do they follow our cues and directions? And I'm not quite that cynical anymore, but there certainly is a part of it. They want to see how seriously you take it when they tell you it's serious. That I do think that's part. There is an element of that in the combine. Football is chock full of guys whose greatest attributes were that they were stubborn SOBs who wouldn't listen to. Why is Marshawn Lynch one of the greatest running backs of his generation? Because of his extreme defiance.
Yeah, but what was his 40 time?
Like that whole, and the way he runs.
What did he run?
He had that wide-legged stand. His 40 time was actually pretty good. Like he is faster than most people thought he was going to be. He was a very high draft pick, which is a story unto itself.
4.46.
Yeah, and he's a big dude.
4.46 at his size is pretty.
It's pretty insane.
I feel like Marshawn is best known for his mentality.
Yes,
running the ball.
Yes.
It almost overshadows like what a physical freak he was.
Yeah, and if anybody. His hands, like his hand-eye coordination is absurd. But I would agree. Like he's like the size strength combination that he had is pretty off the charts. And then it's just because he was so tough. It's like, yeah, he was really tough. He was also just a dude that you would never want to. Everybody knows Derrick Henry is someone you did not want to tackle, but like Marshawn Lynch he's not like right next to him, but he's in that same sort of ballpark of like that dude is going to punish you.
13 days till spring practice start.
Woohoo! I'm excited.
Speaking of organized exercise, football activities at least. Though.
That's more football than the combine is.
Oh yeah.
The combine is underwear Olympics.
It's spring ball is a lot more interesting in this era, I think, because the vast majority of the roster is there. In years past, you've lost your seniors, but you don't have your freshmen yet. So it's very, very partial and you can only do so much. And now it's darn near the whole team. I think there's only 6 guys from their signing class who are enrolling the old fashioned way in the summer. Everybody else is here. So some guys out, some guys unavailable. I kind of previewed the offense and the defense, 5 storylines for each at onmontlake.com. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. Anything you're interested in watching before we get going here?
In spring practice? Yeah, I'm interested in watching this really tall wide receiver or hearing about him. I'm interested in learning a little bit more about kind of how the offensive line, like how that rotation is going to shape out and like what that group looks like. And then the defensive line for sure. Like Coleman Brusa, I have a real interest in hearing kind of what plan they have for him playing. Cause I don't think he's just going to be someone who's on the field. Like I think they're going to expect him to make a pretty big impact right away.
Yeah. I think they look at him and Cody Green as like their first round picks.
Yeah.
Basically. They're like, there ain't no patience here. Like these dudes are playing and they're playing like big roles right away.
Which I guess last year was Roebuck have been the one that made the true freshman who made the biggest impact right away? Dillard Allen and Robinson certainly got some time, and Rainey Saleh later in the year.
Well, John Mills.
Oh, Mills. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yes.
It's almost, honestly, I forget he was a
17 years
freshman.
old.
Like when I think about their freshman class last year, like Mills sometimes is the last one who comes to mind.
That's
because
funny. Yeah,
he was so a guy right away, and he's so huge. Which is funny, like you said. I think he probably literally was the youngest of the group that played. So,
I'm interested to hear how his hair is coming along. Do you foresee or anticipate any change to the mullet?
I saw him at Pro Day, and it's just as flowing as ever. I cannot picture him. Cannot picture him without a mullet. I can't imagine he would ever get rid of that. You saw, like, his dad and his some of his family and his dad's friends showed up with the mullet wigs on, and
yes,
yeah, I think it's too inherent to the John Mills brand at this point for him to get rid of it. So I don't anticipate any changes to that anytime soon.
Yeah, it is business up front, party in the back.
We'll talk to you next week.
Peace.